I have a question here from David Barkley, who is another of our students. David says, you said you hope to see us land on Mars this century. How realistic is this?
Well, from a fiscal point of view, even with the budgets that we have, if we maintain our focus, and by that I mean an international partnership such as we have for Space Station, could be on Mars by the mid-2030s. But that would require a focused commitment over a couple of decades to develop the necessary technologies and flight systems and then put them into practice. One of the hardest things about doing space exploration is that the time scale, while not impossibly long from a human perspective, is very long with regard to the cycles we see in electoral politics. So when in the United States, when we have a new Congress every 2 years and potentially a new president every 4 years, and other, our partners, European, Japanese partners, governments are on similar time scales, the hardest part of the job can be maintaining the necessary political focus long enough to accomplish it.
I have a question from Beckham Hisseni, who's a student of ours from the University of Essex. Again, this is related to human landing on Mars. He wants to know, is there enough water on Mars to sustain human life? And what kind of population sizes would we be talking about if we were to colonize Mars?
Well, on the latter, I have no idea, and I suspect that there is not a rational estimate of the number of people Mars could support available yet anywhere in the world today. It would be an interesting research problem. As to the question of water, every bit of evidence that we've accumulated over the last couple of decades says that literally there are just oceans of water on Mars in the form of ice underneath the sand. So water has been discovered and discovered and discovered again on Mars. There appears to be a good bit of it.
This is a question, the million-dollar question, that's come in from numerous instructors and students. What's your stance on the possible existence of life elsewhere in the universe?
Well, that's one of those questions that is an incredibly interesting question, or the answer to it is incredibly interesting no matter what it turns out to be. It would be one of the great scientific discoveries of our age to find any form of life beyond the Earth. And if we were never to find any form of life beyond the Earth as far as we could see and detect, that too would be stunning. What would that say about how unique we are here in this little corner of this little galaxy? There are many different ways to look for signs of life, chemical constituents of planetary atmospheres, radio signals, laser signals, and we have devoted some time to looking for both intelligent life as well as just, germs. No one has yet found no one has yet found an unassailably positive indication of life, but we've only been looking for a little while. My own personal opinion, I expect that we will find signs of life. I actually expect to see it while I'm still alive.
I'd like to finish with a question of my own, if I may. I'm going to quote you. You've been quoted as saying, the single overarching goal of human spaceflight is the human settlement of the solar system and eventually beyond. I can think of no lesser purpose sufficient to justify the difficulty of the enterprise, and no greater purpose is possible. What's out there that compels you?
Well, we don't know, and that's what compels me. Another individual, author, Harry Shipman, pointed out some years back that distilled to its essence, the purpose of human exploration is to answer two questions. The first question is it possible to live off the land? I mean, meaning, do we have the technology to make use of natural resources on other planets and moons that we might visit so that we don't have to bring everything from Earth? And the second question is there anything useful to do? economically useful, economically sustainable. Not in the sense necessarily of bringing materials back to Earth. It's hard to imagine we would find something that would be more expensive or more valuable than the cost of shipping it. But is there some form of economically useful activity that can be performed? Those are very interesting questions. So that gives a matrix of 4 possible answers. One is there's no possibility to live off the land and nothing useful to do. So in that future, human spaceflight is limited to adventure tours, if you will, like climbing Mount Everest. People and governments will do it. It will always be interesting for those few who do it. We will always learn things, but fundamentally it will be a niche activity like climbing Mount Everest. If we can utilize local resources and sustain ourselves with minor help from Earth, but there's nothing economically useful to do, then other planets and space generally will be like Antarctica. People go to Antarctica. We've had bases there for over 50 years. They find scientifically interesting and useful activities, but there's no economic gain. And so Antarctica is, at least in our era, there's no economic gain. So Antarctica is not settled in that sense. It's a research station. A fairly large one, but it's still just a research station. If you can't live off the land, but there is something economically useful to do, then space is like a North Sea oil platform. And I probably don't need to explain that to your listeners. Okay, I think it's become self-evident that if we can find something economically useful to do, we'll do it whether we can live there or not. The fourth possibility is that there is something economically useful to do and we can live off the land. And in that future you get, inevitably, human colonization, human exploitation of the solar system, and then maybe later, eventually beyond. Now, here's the thing. No one knows which of those 4 alternatives is true. And they might be different for different places in the solar system. In fact, we would expect that they would be. But no one knows. So there are advocates on either side, and there are people who are true believers on either side of both those questions, but they're all just making it up. No one knows. So space exploration today is an investment in finding out the answers to those questions, and I think that's worth doing. I have felt it to be worth devoting a career to.
Professor Griffin, thank you very much for your time this evening.
You're
Pleasure
very
to talk to you.
welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.